Attacks can't be prevented, but they can be stopped. Modern cyber attackers have already made it inside your network, but you have the upper hand. Find and eradicate threats with extra-hop network detection and response, and shut them out before real damage is done. Learn the advanced techniques attackers are using and how extra-hop stops them with a live attack simulation. Register at securityweekly.com/extra-hop. That's extra HOP.
Managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the U.S. military and the majority of the Fortune 100, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover in one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions monthly and we'll reach out to you once reviewed. And my guest suggestion inbox is empty, so feel free to fill it up. I've cleared out all my guest suggestions. All right. Now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news, you can go to securityweekly.com/ESW293 if you want to check out the stories that we're going to be talking about today. All right. So the first one here is Banco Santander and ForgePoint Capital have teamed up. I assume they raised a fund here. What was the amount? Altogether up to 300 million euro. Yeah, so it sounds like they've worked with ForgePoint quite a bit. So, I mean, the main reason I put this in here is clearly funding for cybersecurity hasn't been materially impacted, I don't think. I think I've heard from a few folks that there might be a bit more reticence in they might not be as loose with their willingness to fund certain companies. Maybe they're doing more due diligence, but certainly the money's still out there. So good to hear. And it's interesting. I guess it's just, this is Santander who put together the press release. I find it interesting that they're using euros here. I guess their headquarters is in Spain, so that makes sense. I guess they have a lot of headquarters, different places, but I think that's their main one.
Well, with the recent currency model, I mean, pretty much it's 1 to 1 to 1 dollar euro.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and pound as well.
Right. Which is crazy.
Well, if it stays there, it's going to be a lot more convenient to travel. And
I remember when I was a kid, it was like 1.5. Well, at the time it was Irish pounds, but euro to a dollar, and then the British pound sterling was basically 2 to a dollar. So yeah, I was over in Ireland recently, and it was basically 1 to 1. It was very easy to convert stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I was in Brazil a couple of weeks ago, and it's 5 reais to $1 US. So again, you just divide everything down there by 5. Very, very easy to do the math in your head. And speaking of euros, French-based TEHTRIS. Love the name. It's kind of a weird spelling, but I imagine it is probably said Tetris. Probably pronounced Tetris. That can't be a mistake.
Let's go with Tetris. That sounds good.
Yeah. So this is a French XDR platform named TEHTRIS, and this is I imagine this has got to be like a Series B, but I don't think they have those details here. No, it's a Series. This must be a Series B. Their Series A was 20 million euros in 2020, and over 260 people. So probably the biggest XDR vendor that I have never heard of.
Right.
And we actually looked at funding, I want to say maybe at the beginning of the year. We started to notice that we were seeing a lot of funding from outside the U.S. And I wonder if that's a trend. And it's one of those things where I can't tell if I'm just looking more closely now or if it's a legitimate trend that we're seeing a lot more startups in Switzerland, in general, in Europe. The number of Israeli startups seem to have increased like 2 or 3-fold over previous years.
Yeah, I was going to say the startups out of Israel were just tremendous and huge for quite a while there.
So I might have to hunt down some actual data for that because I don't know if it's just my personal bias. Just since I started doing the podcast, I started studying these things a lot more closely. But certainly we're seeing a lot of startups, with significant funding out of other countries. India also, we kind of regularly see a lot of stuff out of India as well.
Right.
Vanta, which has some very clever marketing. At RSA, they had something like your sock doesn't have to suck, or I forget how it's worded now. But very clever, because they're all about automating compliance, the evidence gathering that you need to do for a SOC. So they and it's not just SOC 2. There's a bunch of companies that do this kind of stuff, and just in general compliance stuff that's usually very spreadsheet heavy, very labor intensive, very manual labor intensive. Here it is: compliance that doesn't SOC too much. That was I'll paste that in the Discord. Yeah, I'll drop that in the Discord and in the Slack so everybody can see it. But they raised another $40 million, and as Tyler Shields was saying last week, we're seeing a lot of this where if somebody can't raise a new round, they're doing extensions. And this is yet another. I think this is the third extension that we've seen to an existing round. So this is a $40 million extension of its Series B.
Fundamentally, what's the difference between? Is it just a horse of a different color? Or is there something actually fundamentally different about raising another round and calling it an extension versus another round? Because at the heart of it, money's money that you owe.
So Tyler would have the real definitive answer here, but I'll take a stab. I think one of the things is it's bad messaging to have a down round. You don't want a Series C that's smaller than your Series B. That could affect confidence in the company and its performance and its ability to raise funds. So the optics are better adding to an existing round than doing a new round that's smaller. And I imagine it's a whole lot less hassle and paperwork to add to an existing round than to start an entirely new round.
Sure, because you have the investors, you have the relationship, you have the history.
Yeah. You're adding to a term sheet instead of starting from scratch. I imagine with the new round. But again, investors might be screaming at me that I got that all wrong. But I'm trying to use what I've learned from Tyler and Will Lynn and other smart investors who understand this kind of stuff.
That's okay. If they're screaming at you, they can reach out. It would be good to have our listeners really understand that.
Do you have any guest suggestions that can suggest my bad take or can help me with my bad takes? Drop them in our guest suggestion form. All right. So Vanta, and we don't have a ton of stories for news today, but that's fine for me. We've had some really big weeks for news. I think it's natural to see that kind of ebb and flow.
So I'm sort of interested in this Iron Vest biometric authentication, decentralized biometric password manager.
Sure. Yeah. Go for it.
So, it's interesting messaging. I don't know much about the company beyond the press release here and the website, but in terms of password managers, password vaults, we know that they're substantively better, right? So they are predicated still on passwords. We know that biometrics do help. There are problems with them as well, but passwordless biometric authentication, what makes this better? What makes it different? I guess it's the decentralization, right? It's the quote microsegmentation of passwords, similar to some of the other areas that network focused versus identity focused. So it's an interesting concept, but you really don't hear much about decentralized password management, because by default, a password manager is centralized, passwordless, or just centralized password management.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a whole lot here that looks that differentiates it from your 1Password, your LastPass, some of the others there, except they're also doing throwaway credit cards. So like, is it privacy.com? I think it's privacy.com, where they create virtual credit card numbers for you, and you can basically treat it like a gift card. You can put like, okay, this credit card number only has access to $100. So once it hits $100, that it's cut off. So it sounds like they're doing something like that, except they call them masked credit cards. But then, everything else sounds okay. They're also doing masked email addresses. So I guess throwaway credit cards, throwaway email addresses. So they're kind of combining two different types of apps here. Like I've seen privacy apps that just do like the throwaway stuff, to allow you to anonymize, your data that you use online, to avoid being tracked and things like that. So they also have a virtual phone number. And then combining that with a password database. But one other thing they mentioned here.
They call it multi-party computing. It's a decentralization method, I guess, similar to the idea of micro-sharding a little bit.
None of that makes sense to me. I mean, it's throwaway email addresses and credit cards and a virtual phone number that isn't tied to you. Like all that. Those are neat privacy products that are all kind of rolled into one. But I don't know what you mean when you say micro-sharding, though.
So when I was working as an analyst, we had a couple of companies that did micro-sharding. And the way it was explained to me was they would take your data and they would scatter pieces of it. Instead of communicating the data encrypted, they would scatter the pieces of data and encrypt the pieces of data, so that if somebody caught the data in transmission and somehow decrypted it, they couldn't get to all of it. It was like different pieces of a puzzle. It was sort of like Mike TV on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. How he goes through the TV and he's all scattered about and can't put them back together.
Sure. Like M&A key control is like that, where you need at least 3 out of 7 people to be able to reassemble a key. So I am familiar with that. That's something you sometimes see in old enterprise controls.
Right. So it seems like maybe they're doing something somewhat similar with their concept of multi-party computing, not storing the data for your authentication in one place, but in multiple places.
Really?
Taking out maybe that single point of failure. Maybe that's the concept here.
I didn't see anything about that. I mean,
it's on ironvest.com/security.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at security, multi-party computing. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the other thing I was looking at is it looks like they provide some kind of overlay. I don't know if they're actually handling the authentication, but they're talking about adding biometrics to third-party websites that you use. And the only way I can imagine you do that is by becoming also an identity provider, using something like SAML to redirect authentication to theirs. So yeah, authentication beyond sign-in.
It's just an interesting topic to me because
I might have to try it out. They have a free. Yeah. I think I have to go a little bit above the free plan to play with some of these, but yeah, I don't want to spend too long with people listening while we scan the website. But we'll talk about it again after we've had some time to play with it.
Yeah, it's just an interesting concept, I think.
Yeah, I mean, especially it's also interesting that they seem to be selling to both B2C and B2B. And we're seeing that more and more now. We're seeing like consumer products that are actually built and designed for consumers, but sold to businesses with the idea that businesses will or can use these as like an employment perk, like offering identity protection or something like that to all your employees is just a perk like gym membership reimbursement or something like that. So that's a neat idea.
Well, I think I may have mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. It's the idea, the iPhone originally started as a consumer product, and then you started having people use it in their personal lives, saying, "Wait a minute, my work phone isn't nearly this good," and employees were rallying for it. But as soon as executives got their hands on it and said, "Well, I'm just going to use this at my business," IT make it work. So that's how a lot of this started. So, backing into the enterprise, getting people familiar with it, especially if it's a person who's sort of a forward technology adopter. Hey, I've used this in my personal life. We don't have anything as good as this in my work environment. Bringing it in that way, it's a smart idea.
Well, especially since I think a lot of our experience with security awareness training and things like that at this point, we've clearly learned that it's unlikely somebody's going to be have bad habits at home, with their computing and their privacy and security habits, but then be amazing at work, right? So this idea that you can somehow separate people's personal digital life and habits and all that and security with their work life. Like we've seen so many breaches that have occurred, because somebody reused a password one place, at a non-work place that got compromised, and then also reused that password at work. And clearly there are points where the two worlds collide in a meaningful way. And I think it's interesting, on the market side to try and combine that to sell a consumer product that's also a business can buy for their employees.
Well, if you think about it, the whole, it started with the, completely remote work at the beginning of 2020. People's work lives are at home now. So they're a lot more likely to take it a lot more seriously when they know, hey, this is my stuff. Your personal stuff is usually more near and dear to your heart. It doesn't matter what your work's telling you. Your personal stuff is still your personal stuff for most people. And, the fact that people are working at home a lot more, that quite literally hits closer to home. And so people are more conscientious about it because they want to protect their personal stuff. They want to protect their kids. More and more of this data is coming into their homes. And so, it was a very, very, very unfortunate thing that happened at the beginning of 2020 and still lingering a little bit. But in terms of security awareness and good business practices and hygiene and all of that, I think it's made a positive impact for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's definitely not something we can ignore at this point. Sean, you've been quiet. Any news stories here that caught your attention?
Yeah, certainly the cyber M&A expected to remain robust in 2023 is pretty interesting. I think that this has been one of the challenges that we've seen, companies acquiring other companies and really being able to do their due diligence and understand what is the cybersecurity posture or the security posture of the systems of that company that they're acquiring. This makes a lot of sense. There's plenty of companies out there that grow through acquisitions or have identified that this is a niche they want to grow into or acquire a competitor, and they want to make sure that the security of the systems that they are acquiring, that they connect into their environment, are going to be appropriate. This makes a lot of sense to me, even given the economic conditions. The security of the systems, and when you interconnect these, and we see a lot of that with our customers, it remains important. It continues to be even more important, because the last thing a company wants to do is incorporate a new company and their technology systems, which tend to be the same things, Active Directory, et cetera, and then interconnect them, and all of a sudden attackers have a way in through this other company, this new acquisition. So I see that as being very strong. That there's definitely going to continue to be a need there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw somebody tweeting about it as if like this would be like a single event, like, oh, cybersecurity is going to consolidate, as if it's not something that's been constantly happening, over the past 30 years. And how do you get new security companies? You acquire companies. Once they're if they have to stay on for an extra year or two, they'll stay on, and then they'll take their equity and go start a new company. So it's just something that happens constantly. And acquisitions are often rough on customers. So I don't know. It's again, I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but I'm pretty sure the cybersecurity market, just the raw numbers of vendors in the market, is steadily growing. I don't see it shrinking or consolidating down anytime soon.
No, I think it's going to be pretty robust across the board. Companies acquiring other companies, and certainly building out their portfolio. I mean, we're in an industry of checkboxes, like it or not, and a lot of customers are comparing the checkboxes of this customer or this company and what their product is with another one, and making sure that they have what they need. I think that's why XDR is the new buzzword, right? Someone goes, "Hey, we have an XDR because it does this," and now all the others are like, "Okay, well, you have an EDR, but do you have an XDR?" And then people are scratching their heads about what that actually means and what capabilities really define an XDR, right?
Yeah, this is something I studied. This effect is something I studied a lot when I was at 451 Research. And I did some talks about it, where specifically I was following Endpoint. And Endpoint has some very clear market trends that you can follow, where Endpoint security has had two large consolidation events, and I mapped everything out, all the companies where, like in 2004, 2005, we had like 40, 50 cybersecurity vendors, and then it went down to like 20 or 30, by 2009. And already at that point, when it was shrinking down, it was already growing again, because AV was getting beat up. Was not doing a good job protecting against attacks. That was the age of go to the wrong website and suddenly you're compromised. Just all you have to do is visit the website, and this what they call them, kits, where they were creating custom unique malware on the server side and delivering that in real time. Like they would even determine your platform. Like, do we need to send the Windows 10 version or the Windows 7 version or the Windows XP version, and it was all parameter calls. And then I can't think of the term. And then the kit would generate that malware on the fly and deliver it just to you. It was special made just for you. And so then we saw Next Gen AV and SentinelOne and Cylance and CrowdStrike all popped up, and I followed that, and it's all consolidated back down again. There's probably still well over 100 endpoint security vendors out there, but it actually has consolidated quite a bit. And that first round, remember, if you wanted a firewall on your Windows or Mac Windows or Mac, you had to buy it. They actually sold it separately. That was a separate product you could spend money on, was just a firewall. And then all of a sudden it was, and then all of a sudden, well, Black Ice was more than just a firewall, though. It was an IPS as well, a host IPS. But all that got consolidated. If you wanted to encrypt your hard drive, that was a product you had to buy separately.
Right.
And then that got built into the OS. VPN, you had to buy a client VPN product. And then it got built into what eventually we called EPP, endpoint prevention protection platforms, something like that. So, and cloud, I think is really where cloud and data, I think is where we're just going to see a lot of fragmentation and consolidation all happening at the same time.
Yeah, the biggest challenge that we've been seeing is certainly around the management story of devices, whether they're joined to on-prem or they're joined to cloud, and how to do that management across those different systems. So I think that's a big area of opportunity, and certainly the vendors that are able to capture that as well as have a good security story are going to be successful.
And so I mean, one of the bigged ones, the most shocking, I've already forgotten the name of the private equity firm. I had never heard about it before this, but the same private equity firm acquired FireEye, RSA, McAfee, like they owned like more than half of all the old school giant security companies, big security platform companies, and just carved them all up and spun them out. And we're starting to see that now. It looks like with Thoma Bravo picking up Ping and SailPoint in the same year. And aren't they? They're also the ones who picked up ForgeRock. So they just picked up.
SailPoint and Ping are pretty big. I mean, we see a number of customers using SailPoint for identity management, and then of course Ping for federation and identity. SailPoint for management of cloud systems, across cloud systems, and then Ping is managing the identity and handling the federation. So that's a good play there.
And then ForgeRock.
Right.
And ForgeRock that's more B2B2C. So like when you log into like Bank of America, I think they have the top 9 banks or something like that as customers. So, if you log into any large U.S. bank, you're logging in through ForgeRock, I think.
Yeah.
So
sounds right.
Yeah, each of them multi-billion-dollar purchases: $2.8 billion for Ping, $6.9 for SailPoint, and $2.3 for ForgeRock. Yeah. So yeah, it's crazy to see so many identity management vendors all under one PE, but I guess no less crazy than RSA, FireEye, and McAfee all going to the same PE.
Right.
Let's see here. What's next? So might as well mention this next here. So I wrote up my experiences. I went to Brazil for the first time, and what I was interested in, because my company put on kind of like a one-day invite-only CISO event. And so all the CISOs are just talking about their challenges, their experiences, and stuff like that. And I was really interested to see it because I haven't traveled a whole lot internationally outside Europe. I did go to Colombia, so I got kind of that feeling from South America on where people are at, and that was for a security conference. But certainly when I went to the Middle East 10 years ago, they were way behind in terms of tech and security maturity, and which is one of the reasons they were bringing in folks from the outside. That you could make a lot of money if you're willing to move to the Middle East and help them fix their security issues. Sure. But yeah, going to Brazil, going to Sao Paulo, it was identical to the conversations that I'm hearing here. So it was interesting seeing that, they're no further behind than anybody here in the U.S. from what I could tell from the conversations happening. And Sao Paulo is like a huge ton of startups there, a lot of tech there, a lot of banking there, finance. They have a lot of neobanks in Brazil. So I found it just really interesting to get that perspective. I don't often get non-U.S. perspective on how things are going. I get a little bit from Australia from listening to Risky Business, to that podcast, but otherwise I've got some gaps in my knowledge and perception of how security is going in other parts of the world.
It's definitely interesting for sure. I mean, while we all kind of deal with the same sort of challenges and issues and attack profiles, but there's definitely differences in size of businesses. Talking with folks over in Australia, talking with folks in Europe about different ages of company sizes, ages of companies, as well as their size, how they're distributed, how they manage these challenges. It's always fascinating for me.
Yeah. Oops. I closed my news window by mistake. Let's see what else.
I want to hear about this ghostwriting of tweets.
Yeah,
yes.
I couldn't get into that, so I don't have a subscription, so you'll have to.
Oh, sorry about that. I think I actually do have a subscription. I should have grabbed a copy of that and sent it over to you guys. But yeah, so there's a lot of this has been all over social. People saying, I know you can probably make a lot of money doing that, but that much, so a lot of people are very skeptical about this, about the truth to it. But some of the people who actually pay for these things, like there's been enough feedback at this point that I think this is pretty legit. A lot of folks want really good Twitter game, and they're willing to pay somebody else to help them, get to a certain level. And it's not like people are logging in directly to their accounts to do it. It's more like, I'll draft you a bunch of tweets and you choose which ones you use, which ones you don't. So it's more like ghostwriting in that case, where you do get some editorial control over what you send. It's not somebody just logging into your Twitter and pretending to be you.
Sure, you can even have federated access. I know when I've worked at a few companies, the executives have wanted the marketing team or the social media team to create and actually post the tweets, and so you can obviously have accounts, you pay for it, but you have different logins to those, and you can use services that will, like the buffers and
Owly and Buffer
of the world. Yeah,
and they have a whole editorial workflow built into them, right? Like you can just have somebody who can only create draft tweets, and then you can approve or decline them, which moves them into scheduling, and Buffer automatically does the scheduling for you. Yeah, so it's I mean, it's really interesting to hear that. Like, I can't imagine that being my whole job, though. Like, so what do you do for a living? Nice Ferrari. What do you do? I write tweets for rich people.
I mean, hey, if you can come up with compliance that doesn't sock, fun little things and
doesn't sock too much.
The equivalent of a jingle is for a company, you get paid to be creative. Why not? I mean, it's really small things. You're creating really, really small things. But
I mean, if you're even a month off your game, like that could be the difference between a tweet going viral because of a funny meme and just complete cringe fest. So somebody doing this, they really do have to kind of keep up with the trends and what's popular. And, if the goal is for the tweet to do really well in terms of, what's the metric? Number of times it's seen. Help me out here, Katie. What's that metric?
I don't know. There's a magic number of
impressions. Thank you. Impressions.
Oh, I had no idea where you were going with that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thanks, Gus. Yeah, no, it was the I mean, because that's part of the contract, right? Like you hire PR firm or something like that. You know, you want a guarantee of like a certain number of mentions or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so far from that. I'm like, woohoo! One person read something I wrote, so mega impressions and whatever.
Yeah. So I've got a must read here. This with technology, there's no such thing as magic. It's for me, it's nothing really new. But what's interesting about it, it's kind of taking this idea, of how companies market themselves and how innovation occurs and things like that. And Keith here, who is actually the Keith Hoodlet was one of the original founders of the Application Security Weekly podcast. Him and Paul started that, and I think he was there for like the first 50 or so episodes of Application Security Weekly. His background is actually in, let me look it up real quick here, something about behavioral science. So this is all about biases, about different biases and how to spot them, when looking at the market. So really interesting read, and he breaks it up. The way he breaks it up is really nice, and kind of builds on some of the work that Haroon Meer and I did in the keynote called "The Products We Deserve," where we go into how the analyst industry works, how companies get seen, how they kind of increase their presence in the market. So really interesting read there if you want to understand kind of the vendor side of things, how the whole marketing side of vendor stuff works. And it's kind of funny because a lot of it's kind of attacking the approaches there, but at the same time, you could use this post, like this is just straight up success. Like if you just treat this whole post as instructional and you're in marketing for a vendor, it's gonna work. Like the process clearly works and it has been working for a while. So you could treat the whole thing as just instructive for anybody building a marketing program for a startup. All right. I think I'm going to jump to, is there anything I missed here that I wanted to talk about? I don't think so. So squirrel story. Let's hit the squirrel story here.
Oh, I'm again embarrassed for Massachusetts.
Yeah, I mean, other shows have even have segments just for Florida man. Now Massachusetts woman gets to put her stamp.
This is like the second or third time. There was the turkey thing a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
The attack turkeys.
Florida man has competition. So for
Massachusetts woman and her bees, those poor bees.
All right. Do you want to give kind of were you already familiar with this story, Katie?
I actually did see it. Yeah. I saw it before you posted the stories today. So apparently what happened earlier this month is some woman was threatened with eviction, and the deputies were deployed to her house. And as soon as they tried to get in touch with her and tried to get her to come out of the house, she released a swarm of bees. She had a hive, and she let the bees out, and they swarmed the deputies. And
a bunch of people got stung too.
Yeah, a bunch of people got stung. She was wearing protective gear. They had absolutely no warning that they were going to be swarmed and stung by bees. And, if somebody's allergic, they could die. That was a point made in this little news release here. She used bees to try to not be evicted from her house. So,
so slight correction there. It wasn't her house. It was somebody else getting evicted.
I'm sorry. Yeah. You're right.
And she showed up to protest it. So apparently this is a pretty common thing, is people showing up to protest somebody getting evicted.
With bees.
Really?
Yeah. No, I didn't realize that this is a common thing, that like people, if somebody's being evicted, like the word goes out over Facebook or wherever they're coordinating, and they'll show up and like try and block the eviction from happening. And she just happened to have a ton of bees, and she was like, yeah.
She brought her hive of bees to this house.
Yeah. That was her hammer. That was the tool she had at her disposal, were bees.
And even if you're not allergic to bees, there are a lot of people who are scared stiff of bees. Yeah. So
a swarm of bees is generally pretty terrifying, especially when they're angry, which is what she made them angry on purpose.
Well, she was charged with assault and battery by means of a dangerous weapon, assault by means of a dangerous weapon, and disorderly conduct.
Yeah, 4 counts. So, and the deadly weapon was bees, to be clear.
I don't know what kind of charge that holds, but I could also see animal cruelty coming in there. I'm sure some Humane Society people might make that case too. You can't use you can. People do use live animals as attack mechanisms all the time, but it's not right.
I think once you unleash an animal or creature against another, knowing that they could cause some harm, potentially serious harm with bee allergies, then there's definitely going to be some charges around that.
Yeah, especially if you don't have any claim of self-defense, which clearly she didn't. She just rolled up on these cops, serving this eviction. And
at least in the picture, she's wearing protective gear.
Yeah. She just rolled up on these cops and just unleashed the bees, smashing.
She knew that there was potential for some serious damage.
Oh yeah, like there was a quote. I don't know if it's on this one, but somebody mentioned they were allergic, and she was like, "Oh, you're allergic? Good."
Oh, Florida man and Massachusetts woman are one of a kind. Well, they can't be one of a kind. That was a stupid thing to say. Never mind. Apparently it's late. I need to go to sleep.
Yeah, they're peas in a pod or something like that might work a little bit better there.
Or bees in a pod?
Bees in a hive? Yeah. Wow. So, weird stuff. People.
On that note, but
some weird, wild stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, people need to chill out, man. Need to chill out. All right. So that's all we've got for you today. If you stayed for the bees article, thank you. If you enjoyed any of what you heard today, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Anywhere else that will take podcast reviews, we would appreciate that. Or if you just have a comment, anything like that, you can hit us up on Twitter. You can email us or hit us up on LinkedIn as well. So thanks so much, Sean and Katie, for joining me today. My script is all messed up. It says Tyler and Katie. I had to really kind of adjust on the fly today. But thanks to both of you.
It's that kind of day. That kind of day.
Yep.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys helping out today. And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We will be back next week, and Matt Alderman will be sitting in for me next week. I'll actually be on vacation early next week, but later in the week, I am delivering the keynote at LasCon in Austin, Texas. So if you are in Austin, Texas, and you're going to LasCon, please say hello. And love to meet anybody who listens to the podcast in real life. But I'll see you 2 weeks from now. Thanks.